Hi guys, so I read How Come Jazz Isn't Dead by Giddens. Giddens talks about jazz in four stations. They basically just describe the course that jazz has taken from when it began to now. The article really helped me put into perspective how each player in each era of jazz influenced it and made it into what it is now. It showed how the music was always changing and how people reacted to those changes. The first station he calls native. This is the time when music was being made to reflect an area's aspects of life and it was made to bring people together. He says that it developed a distinct and local character, definitely to New Orleans, where he believes it all started with all different forms of music to help create jazz. These different forms were marching bands, Spanish dances, minstrelsy, opera, slave chants, and a lot of other things that were going on during that time in New Orleans. Basically, just anything that you heard contributed to making jazz. Um, this type of music was applicable to every type of occasion, from funerals to picnics to anything that people wanted to use this type of music for. Um, Giddens talks about how if jazz would have stayed in this station forever, then the best thing that probably would have happened was Oliver's Creole Jazz Band. But then Oliver invited Armstrong to come play with him, and he brought in that second trumpet to his band, and that changed jazz forever, which brought them to their second station. The second station he calls Sauverne. Giddens calls it the most important station because this is when it turned into a universal art. The music didn't belong to a single place anymore, and it was now being played all over in different ways, and Armstrong was definitely a huge influential player during this time. Um, and not only with his playing, but with his singing too. People were inspired by Armstrong to make their own music and push the limits, and this was always changing the status quo of jazz, and it just never stayed the same. So during this time, the station claims that the music no longer belonged to a single person, but knowing that Armstrong was the biggest and most influential player during this time, who everyone was basing their music off of, do you find that claim to be true? Giddens finds it super hard to leave the second station because jazz during that time was America's pop music, but he calls the third station recessionary. Giddens explains this as when a style of music is forced from the center stage. Jazz was changing during this time into something different than ever before. There was a gap between the jazz and the public as musicians started playing music that only some people could comprehend. Artists during this time were Monk, Davis, Mingus, Blakey, and many others. A quote from Giddens says, "Smart music for smart people." Bop was also popular during this time, something that the general public didn't really understand but made a huge contribution to jazz. Giddens makes a claim about this station, saying that one thing was for sure: jazz was beaten off the beaten path. With everything we know about jazz and how much it was always changing, do you think there ever was a beaten path for jazz? Giddens calls the present station the classical station. He doesn't say this because there isn't still that tradition of jazz or new people making new music in jazz, but because it's hard for new artists to accomplish more than the artists of the past did. Um, the jazz audience of today is more likely to listen to past jazz than present, and new players are content to imitate the artists of the past. A huge contributor during this time is Marsalis. We know a lot about him from previous readings and discussions, and we know that he also created a lot of controversy with his music since he wasn't necessarily playing or making anything new, but because he was just taking the music back to its old ways after people added in electric instruments and all kinds of new things. Considering Giddens' whole article and how much he seemed to have loved the second station with Armstrong, do you think he liked or disliked what Marsalis was doing with his music? And what do you think the older generations that grew up listening to Armstrong and Ellington thought of his music that kind of took it back to what they knew and loved? Giddens finishes off the article about the future of jazz, which he is hopeful about. He says jazz isn't dead because there are still people who want to master it and will bring their own ideas and new styles to it. Something that caught my eye was the idea that music is always changing, and older people of that generation will detest it because it's different than what they heard when they were young. We see that in everyday life with things like social media. Our parents sort of detest it because it's different then when they were growing up, they didn't have it. They had to have more face-to-face interactions, so they just kind of detest it. But we found ways to utilize it and use it to our advantage. This leads me to my final question. Do you think critics who claimed a particular piece of jazz wasn't jazz because they were basing their claims off of what they heard in their youth and what they grew up listening to? And that is all. Thank you.